Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. In this video I'm going to show you some hidden gems on my bookshelves. I have found some books that I don't talk about nearly enough on this channel, and that's because I read them quite some years ago, but they're all books that I absolutely love and that I would never get rid of. So I thought it would be kind of funny to show you these books and talk about them a little bit. I have 10 things to talk about, so here we go. Now, the first novel is a book that is very controversial because I think it was actually forbidden when it was published. It was such a horrid story and people were shocked by it, and I completely understand why that is. I'm talking about American Psycho by Bret Easton Ellis. So this one is about a serial killer. He is a perfectionist. He likes to live a life in order, but in his spare time he also likes to bring women home with him and kill them brutally. And it's not just women. I read this when I was maybe 20 and I was so creeped out. I've never been as creeped out by a book as I was by this one. I mean, I felt it in my body. I almost couldn't complete some chapters. I thought to myself, how can anyone even imagine these things happening? And if you have watched the movie, you don't know what is coming to you in this book, because I do believe that the movie is not as detailed as this novel. So if you're interested in also reading the book, then I definitely recommend that you do so, but beware. The next hidden gem I have found is a very old book, and that is The Prince of Tides by Pat Conroy. So as you can see, it's a very used copy. I received this copy from a friend of mine some years ago, and she said to me that this was one of her favorite novels. So she gave it to me. I don't know why that is. I would have kept it myself, but she gave it to me. I read it and I fell in love with it. So this is a story of a family who lives on a ranch, I think in the USA, in the southern states. I don't want to give away too much of the story. Once again, it's a very brutal story, but in a different way from American Psycho. This is more about family relations and development, and it's a beautifully written story. I love it so much, and I know that someday I will have to read it again. Then I have some non-fiction. If you are a fan, or if you were a fan of the Spice Girls back in the days, I grew up with them and I was definitely a fan, and my favorite Spice Girl was Jerry Halliwell. So I have here her biography called If Only, and I will say that this is not the best writing, obviously. She's not a writer, but she has an incredibly fascinating story, I think, especially if you are already interested in her as a person. I really liked it. It gave me a rare insight into her childhood, how she grew up. I remember a scene in which she tells about this habit of hers in which when she went biking, then whenever she reached a crossroad, she had to speed up and then make it while the light was green. Otherwise, bad things would happen. Or it's more like if she made it while it was green, then this good thing would happen to her. I like these kinds of anecdotes, and I kind of felt a connection to her through reading this. So I definitely recommend it if you are interested to read about her. And then I have two non-fiction books which are set in different countries, but they are about the people of that country. So the first one is set in Great Britain. More specifically, it's set in England, and I'm talking about Watching the English, The Hidden Rules of English Behavior by Kate Fox. Now this book is so hilarious because what Kate Fox did is that she observed the English people through about a year, I think, and she writes about their habits and how you are supposed to live if you are a true Englishman. And it's so funny. I remember a scene in which she tells us about how English people are obsessed with lines. You cannot skip ahead of a line, because if you do so, it's like a death sin. Tell me if it's true or not. I think it's true because I have been to London quite a few times, and those lines, man. Anyway, so this one comes with a lot of peculiar but interesting facts about the English people. The other one is about America, and this one is actually more of a sad story because, well, it's Nickel and Dimed by Barbara Ehrenreich, undercover in low-wage USA. So it's about this woman who goes undercover and works as a single full-time mom with 3 jobs, I think, because she has to earn enough money to be able to provide for her family. At least that's the illusion she's going for. She realizes that her wages are way too low to even cover the basics. It is a non-fictional piece of work about how hard it is to do well in America and to even provide for your family. I was so touched by this, and it was definitely an interesting and educating read. Let's get back to some fiction. Here I have The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath. Now this is one of my favorite classics. It's a very depressing book because it's about this girl who feels like she lives in a bell jar. She cannot connect to the outer world, and she feels socially unstable, and she just feels lonesome. Many of you may have already read this novel, and then you know what I'm talking about. I read this the first time around when I was at university, and the first time I read it, I liked it, but I felt so depressed by it that I didn't really like it after all. But the second time I read it, I fell in love with it. Also, Sylvia Plath is a poetess, and you can read that from this writing. She writes beautifully. Then we of course have my favorite book of all time, and that is The Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger, which I do not talk about nearly enough on this channel. This is a book that divides the waters. You either love it or you hate it. That's what most people say. Obviously I loved it, and that's because of the main character, Holden Caulfield, who is a very pessimistic guy. He is a teenager, and he has, as I said, a very pessimistic view on the world. He calls a lot of people phonies. For instance, if you use the word grand, you are a phony. And basically most grown-up people he thinks are phonies. It's about 3 days in New York in December, in which Holden is all alone trying to figure out life and things and what he wants to do with his life. And it's a story about growing up and still being yourself while growing up. I love it so much. I could reread this book so many times and still not tire from Holden Caulfield. He makes me smile, and even though he's a very pessimistic guy, I think he's so fascinating to read about, and yeah, I just really love this book. As you might know, I love Paul Auster. However, the only book I own of his is this one. This is the Danish title. It is called Winter Notes in English, and it is a biography on his life, but it is written like fiction, I would say, even though that sounds weird, but I love it for that. So it's about Paul Auster's life from he's a child till he becomes a family dad. And once again, there are some scenes in this book which I remember vividly. I'm not going to talk about them here, but it is just a really good biography. And of course, I love a lot of his other fiction. I just don't own it, so I can't really show them as hidden gems on my shelves. I have 2 things left to talk about. The next one is actually a trilogy, and that is this trilogy by Stieg Larsson. Now these are the Danish titles because I read it way before I started this booktube channel, but it is the Men Who Hate Women series, the Millennium series, I think it's called. This is a thriller series, which I'm not that into, I must admit, but this series was dang good. It is so horrid. It has some scenes in it which have stuck in my mind. I'm sure you've either heard of the books or actually watched the movies. I will say that the books give something very unique to the story. I have watched the movies as well, but as per usual, I love the books more. I just really cherish these books, which have been on my shelves for most of my grown-up life, and I really like looking at them and remembering that I read them, I think, during a summer, and I just fell in love with them, even though it's thriller and it's crime. Last but not least, I have here Empire Falls by Richard Rousseau, which I thought was a good book, but it was the ending that blew me away. I obviously cannot tell you what the ending is, but I can't tell you that this book is also turned into a mini-series. It's a book about American life and growing up in one of these states. Just that's it. American life in general, but there's so much to the story, and even though it's a big book, I think it's not until here maybe that the ending, the shocking ending, sets in. You have to read quite a fair amount of pages before you get to that ending, but I think that this book is so good that even though it's long, It wasn't too long in my opinion, and I really appreciated it. And also the mini series is really good. I think it's about 2 episodes, and definitely check them out as well. And that's it for my hidden gems on my bookshelves. I hope you enjoyed this concept, and I hope that you enjoyed hearing some of my stories behind these books, which I cherish very much. Thank you so much for watching, and also in the comments let me know if you have any books on your shelves which you consider hidden gems and why. Thank you so much for watching, and happy reading.